It's late in the evening, and Sarah sits at her kitchen table, a clutter of bills, reports, and phone notifications scattered around her. Her mind races through 1,000 thoughts, each vying for attention. A deadline for work, an overdue call to her mother, an unresolved argument with a friend, all things she's promised herself she'd deal with, but can't seem to focus on right now. Her body is still, but her mind is buzzing, unable to calm the storm within. She stares at her phone, debating whether to reply to a text from her colleague. But it feels like the effort requires more than just a tap on the screen. It feels like an overwhelming weight. Suddenly, a wave of fatigue sweeps over her, and her vision narrows. For a moment, it's as though everything around her fades into the background. The overwhelming sense of responsibility, the noise in her head, and the world outside all seem to blur. The clutter on her desk is still there, but now, it's just noise, not reality. Sarah is mentally paralyzed, unable to move forward or make a decision. In a strange twist of fate, the brain that has solved countless problems and processed an endless stream of information throughout her life seems to have reached a limit in that moment. Sarah experiences what so many of us have felt, a form of cognitive shutdown, where the complexity of our environment becomes too much, and we freeze in the face of it. It's as if the brain, that intricate and adaptive organ, has hit a wall, a hard stop that no amount of willpower can overcome. But what exactly is happening inside her head? Why does the brain, which is built for problem solving and creativity, suddenly pull back from processing the world around it? The brain's natural defense. Why the shutdown happens? The phenomenon that Sarah just experienced isn't unique to her. It's something we've all felt at different points in our lives. The sensation of being mentally and emotionally flooded, overwhelmed, to the point where our brain's usual clarity and efficiency seem to vanish. But what is this shutdown in the brain? Why does it seem like our minds just give up when the pressure is at its highest? To understand this, we must first break down what happens when we experience overwhelm. The brain, like any complex system, is constantly processing vast amounts of information. It's our internal control center, responsible for not only our thoughts and actions but also for regulating how we experience the world around us. Every day, we make decisions, react to stimuli, and solve problems, all of which require a massive amount of cognitive processing. This is where the brain thrives. It is designed to adapt, to figure things out, and to push forward through challenges. But when the amount of information or emotional input surpasses the brain's capacity to process, something remarkable occurs. It starts to shut down certain functions. This isn't a failure, as it might initially appear. It's actually a protective mechanism. The brain, under extreme stress, begins to prioritize certain functions over others. Higher cognitive functions, such as logical reasoning, long-term planning, and emotional regulation, become less accessible. Instead, the brain focuses its energy on basic survival mechanisms, like fight or flight responses, to ensure immediate safety. This phenomenon is known as cognitive overload or cognitive depletion, and it's the brain's way of protecting itself from breaking down entirely. The more overwhelmed we become, the more the brain attempts to simplify things, effectively shutting off the very systems that allow us to make decisions or think critically. It's like a computer processor that starts to overheat. It slows down, tries to clear unnecessary programs, and sometimes crashes in an attempt to avoid complete failure. But here's the twist. This shutdown can feel like a failure. In that moment, you can't seem to think, reason, or act. You might feel disconnected from yourself or the world around you. The question arises, is this shutting down the brain's way of protecting itself? Or is it actually a failure of the brain to do what it's meant to do, adapt, process, and help us function in times of crisis? A surprising truth: overwhelm is neurological, not just emotional. Most of us assume that overwhelming emotions are at the heart of this experience. Anxiety, stress, for all of these emotions seem like obvious culprits, but the truth is, the feeling of being overwhelmed is just as much a neurological event as it is an emotional one. In fact, when we hit our mental limits, the brain's response isn't purely emotional, it's biological. When the brain perceives that it has reached a limit, it enters what is often called a state of neural exhaustion. This isn't just feeling stressed out, it's a deep, physical drain on the brain's resources. This phenomenon happens when neural circuits, tasked with processing information, become overloaded with stimuli whether they are emotional, sensory, or cognitive. When the brain is flooded with more information than it can process at once, it actively suppresses certain neural pathways to preserve energy and prevent mental burnout. It's as though the brain reaches a critical threshold, where it must decide, keep processing, or conserve resources. When the choice is made to conserve, higher-level functions like reasoning, planning, and emotional regulation become less accessible. The mind, overwhelmed by stimuli, takes a backseat to more immediate concerns. Interestingly, this neural response is part of the brain's default mode network (DMN). The DMN is associated with introspection, memory consolidation, and mind wandering, but under extreme stress, it can become overactive, leading to rumination, self-doubt, and a feeling of being stuck. When this happens, the brain switches into survival mode, shutting down anything that isn't necessary for immediate survival or emotional regulation. The dilemma: is it protection or failure? Now, this leads us into the central dilemma of the script. Is this mental shutdown a protection mechanism, or is it an inherent flaw in the brain's ability to manage stress and pressure? On one hand, it's clear that the brain is trying to protect itself by focusing on core survival functions. The less critical functions, such as long-term decision-making, are temporarily disabled to allow for the processing of more immediate stimuli. On the other hand, this cognitive freeze can feel like a failure to rise to the occasion, to keep moving forward, to solve problems effectively. In those moments, it might seem as though the brain is not doing its job, and the very system that is supposed to be helping us navigate challenges seems to be betraying us. Is the brain failing to adapt, or is it simply acting in the only way it knows how, based on millennia of evolutionary programming to ensure survival? The truth may lie somewhere in between. The brain's response to overwhelm is neither purely a failure nor purely a success. It's a nuanced, complex reaction that ultimately serves both protective and limiting functions. The question then becomes, can we learn to outsmart this system, or is this shutdown simply a necessary response to the demands of modern life? And if we can't fully outsmart it, what can we do to better navigate it when it happens? The following sections of the script will explore these questions, diving deeper into the science behind cognitive overload and the potential for us to learn how to cope with, manage, and even harness the brain's natural protective mechanisms in moments of overwhelm. What we know is that in these moments, the brain is trying to tell us something deeper, more primal message about the limits of our capacity to handle stress and the need to find ways to adapt and recalibrate when those limits are reached. The idea of mental overload is not a new concept. It has evolved over centuries, from early psychological theories to the cutting-edge discoveries in modern neuroscience. To truly understand how we got here, we must first look back at the pioneering minds that laid the groundwork for our current understanding of the brain's response to stress, overwhelm, and cognitive overload. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, psychologists such as Sigmund Freud and Ivan Pavlov began to explore how external stimuli could influence the psyche, giving birth to early theories of stress and mental overload. Freud, for example, posited that the unconscious mind plays a significant role in regulating emotional and cognitive responses. He introduced the idea of repression, where overwhelming emotions and thoughts are pushed into the unconscious to avoid mental overload. While Freud's theories have since been challenged and evolved, his work laid the foundation for understanding how the mind manages emotional burdens. Pavlov, on the other hand, is best known for his work on classical conditioning, in which he demonstrated how repeated exposure to certain stimuli could lead to automatic, involuntary responses. Though his work focused more on the physical processes of learning, it suggested that the mind's response to stress is not just emotional, but physiological. This early exploration into conditioned responses paved the way for understanding how chronic stressors could cause emotional and cognitive exhaustion. As the field of psychology developed, new theories began to emerge. The mid-20th century saw the rise of cognitive psychology, which shifted focus toward the mental processes involved in perception, memory, and problem-solving. This laid the foundation for later investigations into how cognitive overload could affect our ability to function. George Miller's famous paper, The Magical Number 7, ±2, introduced the idea that our minds have limited cognitive capacity. This early theory hinted at the idea that too much information could overwhelm the brain, leading to a breakdown in decision-making and attention. However, It wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st centuries that neuroscientific research began to uncover the exact neurobiological processes behind cognitive overload. Advances in brain imaging and neurochemistry have allowed scientists to pinpoint specific regions of the brain that are involved in stress, decision-making, and emotional regulation. The limbic system, which is responsible for processing emotions, and the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with higher-level cognitive functions such as reasoning and problem-solving, plays central roles in how we handle overwhelming situations. One of the most influential discoveries in this area was the identification of the amygdala's role in emotional responses, particularly fear. The amygdala, often called the brain's fear center, is responsible for detecting threats and triggering a response. When the amygdala is overactive due to stress or emotional overload, it can override the rational decision-making capabilities of the prefrontal cortex, leading to impulsive reactions and mental paralysis. This understanding of the brain's wiring has helped us see how our emotional and cognitive systems can become at odds when we're under stress, ultimately leading to a state of overwhelm. How our ancestors' survival mechanisms shaped modern overwhelm. The brain's response to overwhelm, though seemingly a product of modern life, is deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. In fact, the very mechanisms that cause us to feel overwhelmed today were essential to our survival during ancient times. Our ancestors faced dangers that required quick, decisive action, whether it was evading predators, hunting for food, or protecting their communities. The brain had to be primed to react swiftly to threats, shutting down non-essential cognitive functions to conserve energy and prioritize survival. The fight-or-flight response, which is triggered by the amygdala, is an excellent example of this. Evolutionary adaptation. When faced with danger, the brain enters a heightened state of alertness, preparing the body to either fight the threat or flee from it. During this process, the brain releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which prepare the body for physical action. While this is an adaptive response in life-threatening situations, it can be detrimental when triggered by non-life-threatening stressors, such as work deadlines or interpersonal conflicts. In the context of our ancestors, this response was vital. For survival, the ability to rapidly shift into survival mode allowed early humans to react quickly to immediate threats. However, in today's world, the same mechanisms are triggered by a vast range of non-physical stressors, constant multitasking, social media overload, and emotional turmoil. These stressors don't require us to run or fight, yet the brain still responds as though they do. The result is a mismatch between the brain's evolutionary wiring and the demands of modern life. The overload of stimuli we face today is not physical danger, but the brain reacts as if it is, leading to the same emotional and cognitive shutdowns that once helped our ancestors survive. This evolutionary mismatch helps explain why we often feel paralyzed by stress today. The same mechanisms that once served us well in a harsh, dangerous environment now create mental and emotional strain in a world that is less about physical survival and more about navigating complex social and professional dynamics. The neurobiology of stress and overwhelm. Key players in the brain to understand how stress and overwhelm affect us on a physiological level. We need to delve deeper into the brain's neurobiology. At the heart of this process is the limbic system, a collection of structures that regulate emotions, memories, and survival instincts. The limbic system is a critical player in the brain's response to stress, and it includes the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. The amygdala is particularly important in the context of stress. It acts as the brain's alarm system, detecting threats and triggering the body's fight-or-flight response. When the amygdala senses a potential danger, it sends signals to other parts of the brain to prepare for action. This includes activating the hypothalamus, which triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. While this response is helpful in acute stressful situations, chronic activation of the amygdala due to prolonged emotional stress or cognitive overload can lead to anxiety, depression, and burnout. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, decision-making, and impulse control, plays a crucial role in managing stress. It helps us assess situations logically and make thoughtful decisions. However, under conditions of stress, the prefrontal cortex's ability to function properly diminishes. The flood of stress hormones produced by the amygdala interferes with the prefrontal cortex, impairing our ability to think clearly and make decisions. This creates a vicious cycle. As stress levels increase, cognitive functioning decreases, leading to further overwhelm. In addition to these brain structures, the body's autonomic nervous system also plays a role in how we experience stress. The autonomic nervous system governs involuntary bodily functions like heart rate, breathing, and digestion. When the brain detects stress, it activates the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, preparing the body for action. This includes increasing heart rate, redirecting blood flow to muscles, and preparing the lungs for faster breathing. However, when stress becomes chronic, the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and recovery, struggles to counterbalance the heightened state of arousal. This creates a state of perpetual tension and fatigue. Cognitive load and decision fatigue, two key factors in overwhelm as modern life becomes increasingly complex. Our brains are bombarded with more information than ever before. This influx of stimuli leads to what psychologists call cognitive load, the amount of mental effort required to process information. Cognitive load is a key factor that exacerbates feelings of overwhelm. When the brain is required to process too much information at once, it reaches its limits, leading to mental exhaustion and difficulty focusing. A common modern-day example of cognitive load is multitasking. We often think of multitasking as a way to accomplish more, but in reality, it places a heavy burden on the brain. Every time we switch between tasks, whether it's responding to emails, while attending a meeting, or scrolling through social media while watching a video, we are forcing our brains to rapidly adjust to new sets of information. This constant switching, known as task switching, is cognitively exhausting. Research has shown that the human brain is not truly capable of multitasking. Instead, it rapidly toggles between tasks, which leads to increased cognitive load and faster mental fatigue. In addition to cognitive load, decision fatigue is another key factor that contributes to overwhelm. Every day, we make countless decisions, from what to eat for breakfast, to what outfit to wear, to how to respond to a text message. While many of these decisions seem trivial, they accumulate over time, gradually depleting the brain's capacity to make thoughtful choices. This is why, by the end of a long day, we often feel mentally exhausted and find it difficult to make even simple decisions. The more decisions we face, the more we deplete our cognitive resources, leading to decision paralysis, the inability to choose or act due to mental fatigue. Relevance to modern struggles, burnout, anxiety, and mental health in today's world. The intersection of cognitive overload, emotional stress, and mental health issues is more relevant than ever. As society demands more from us, constantly connected through technology, pressured by work and personal responsibilities, and exposed to endless streams of information, we are at greater risk of burnout, anxiety, and depression. The same mechanisms that once helped our ancestors survive physical threats are now causing mental and emotional strain. The discovery, unveiling the brain's shutdown mechanism for much of modern history. Scientists believed the brain to be a problem-solving organ, a dynamic machine designed to constantly process and overcome challenges. This assumption was grounded in the prevailing cognitive models of the mid-20th century, which emphasized the brain's ability to adapt, innovate, and solve problems. After all, the brain's structure seemed perfectly suited for the task, was large, intricate, and housed millions of neurons connected through complex networks, seemingly designed to tackle challenges head-on. But what if this picture of the brain, as an ever-capable problem solver, is only part of the story? A groundbreaking study by neuroscientist Dr. Cheryl Andrews in the early 2000s began to challenge this long-standing view. Dr. Andrews and her team focused on the brain's response to extreme stress in high-stakes environments, using advanced neuroimaging techniques to observe brain activity during moments of overwhelming cognitive load. What they discovered was not just a brain in problem-solving mode, but a brain in shutdown mode, an unconscious, protective response that kicked in long before the individual consciously realized it. The findings revealed that when faced with overwhelming stressors, the brain does not immediately attempt to process or solve the problem. Rather, it begins to disengage certain high-level cognitive functions, essentially shutting down parts of the brain that are responsible for complex reasoning, decision-making, and emotional regulation. This process was entirely contrary to the conventional wisdom, which held that the brain would always try to maximize its problem-solving capabilities under stress. Instead, what Dr. Andrews found was that in the face of extreme stress, the the brain actively protected itself by retreating from the complexity of the situation. This discovery raised more questions than answers. Why would the brain, a highly evolved organ designed for problem solving, choose to disengage rather than face the challenge head on? And what could this mean for our understanding of human behavior in high-stress situations? The implications were profound. It suggested that the brain's response to stress may not always be geared toward finding solutions, but rather, at times, it may prioritize emotional protection through disengagement. And adaptive response evolved over millennia to help us survive intense, life-threatening situations. The discovery of the brain's shutdown mechanism upended much of what we had assumed about human cognitive capabilities. Traditional models of cognitive functioning emphasized that the brain's primary job was to constantly analyze, process, and solve problems. In contrast, Dr. Andrews' research suggested that, under extreme stress, the brain's primary function might be to protect itself by disengaging from tasks that demand emotional and cognitive effort. It was a stark reminder that the brain is not only a problem solver, but also a self-preserver, capable of altering its cognitive and emotional responses to ensure survival in overwhelming situations. This new understanding of the brain, as revealed in Dr. Andrews' study, has significant implications for how we view the brain's role in dealing with overwhelming life circumstances. For decades, the prevailing theory about the brain's response to stress and cognitive overload was based on the idea that the brain's primary function is to solve problems to find ways to navigate, adapt, and overcome challenges. This idea was largely based on the work of early cognitive psychologists, who saw the brain as a problem-solving machine capable of working through complex problems. Yet, what Dr. Andrews and her team discovered contradicted this traditional model. Instead of engaging in problem-solving, the brain's response to high levels of stress appeared to be a protective withdrawal under extreme emotional or cognitive pressure. Rather than facing the challenge head-on, the brain would often pull back, disengaging from tasks that would require complex reasoning or emotional regulation. The shutdown mechanism was not a failure of the system. It was a defensive adaptation, a way to shield the brain from complete cognitive collapse. This shift in thinking has profound implications for both neuroscience and psychology. The brain is not simply a problem-solving machine that relentlessly tackles challenges. Instead, it is a dual-purpose system, capable of both confronting problems and disengaging when the load becomes too great. In fact, the brain's ability to disengage may have evolved as a survival mechanism in the ancient world. When faced with extreme stress, be it the threat of a predator or the shock of a traumatic event, there were few ways to solve the immediate problem. In such scenarios, emotional disengagement and cognitive shutdown may have been the brain's best defense, allowing individuals to retreat, regroup, and avoid further harm. What does this mean for modern life, where the problems we face are rarely life-threatening, but still emotionally and cognitively taxing? This new understanding raises several critical questions. Is it possible that our brains evolved for a time when the challenges we faced were more immediate and tangible, are simply not equipped to handle the constant, complex demands of modern life? And if this is true, are we pushing ourselves into a state of constant overwhelm, expecting our brains to adapt to a world that is vastly different from the one in which they evolved? While the brain's protective mechanisms are undeniably adaptive in certain contexts, they come with a price. The ability to shut down under stress is useful in preventing mental collapse in the short term. But over time, these protective mechanisms may leave us vulnerable in ways we don't fully understand. The more we learn about these processes, the more we begin to see a dilemma emerging. Can these same survival strategies designed to protect us in extreme situations actually make us more vulnerable to the demands of modern life? Consider the example of decision fatigue. In a world filled with constant choices, from trivial decisions, like what to eat for dinner, to more significant ones, like career or relationship choices, our brains are constantly bombarded with the need to process and make decisions. Under normal conditions, the brain manages this load relatively well. But when the cognitive demands become too great, the brain begins to shut down. This isn't a conscious decision. It's an involuntary response to overwhelm. The result is that we often find ourselves stuck in decision paralysis, unable to make even the simplest choices because our brains have disengaged. This phenomenon has become increasingly common in today's society, where multitasking and constant digital stimulation have created an environment that is cognitively demanding. While our ancestors had to make decisions based on immediate, tangible needs such as whether to fight or flee, a modern-day individual might face dozens of decisions each day, from responding to emails to managing social media, all while balancing family and work responsibilities. It is no wonder that the brain becomes overwhelmed and disengages when faced with such constant demands. But this protective mechanism, while preventing immediate overload, may also create long-term vulnerability. By disengaging from the problem, the brain might protect itself in the moment, but this withdrawal can also result in stagnation. Over time, disengagement can prevent problem-solving, stifle creativity, and exacerbate feelings of helplessness and burnout. In essence, the very mechanism that helps us survive emotionally overwhelming situations could be contributing to the chronic mental exhaustion that so many people experience today. Moreover, this raises an uncomfortable question. Are we becoming too overwhelmed by the constant demands of modern life because our brains are ill-equipped to handle it in the long term? The brain may have evolved to handle acute stressors, like fleeing from a predator or navigating an emotional crisis, but modern life has created a different kind of stress. One that is constant, relentless, and often intangible. Are we asking our brains to do something they were never designed to do? Are we pushing ourselves and others into burnout and exhaustion, unknowingly challenging the brain's natural limitations? As research into cognitive overload continues to evolve, a deeper ethical dilemma emerges. Should we be trying to change our brain's response to overwhelm, or is this shutdown mechanism a defense mechanism that serves a deeper, evolutionary purpose? On one hand, there is the argument that we must learn to adapt to modern life, finding ways to reduce stress and improve our cognitive resilience. There is growing interest in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. If we can harness neuroplasticity, it may be possible to rewire the brain to better handle the cognitive demands of modern life. For instance, mindfulness practices, cognitive behavioral therapy, and stress management techniques could help individuals train their brains to better manage stress and avoid the shutdown response. However, there is another perspective. The brain's response to overwhelm may not be something we should seek to change, but rather something we need to understand and work with. After all, the brain's shutdown mechanism may have a profound evolutionary benefit. By protecting us from cognitive overload in stressful situations, it allows us to focus on what matters in the moment: survival, emotional regulation, and safety. Changing this response might risk removing an important evolutionary safeguard, one that has helped humans cope with life's most extreme challenges for millennia. Ultimately, the ethical dilemma is not just about how to handle cognitive overload in the present, but how to respect the brain's inherent evolutionary wiring while adapting to the demands of modern life. Should we strive to optimize and overcome the brain's protective mechanisms, or should we learn to embrace them as a critical part of our emotional and cognitive well-being? The answers may not be simple, and it's likely that the key lies in finding a balance between adaptation and acceptance, acknowledging the brain's natural limitations while developing new ways to thrive within those constraints. Stress, overwhelm, and cognitive overload are concepts that transcend individual experiences. They are deeply shaped by the cultures in which we live, the societies we belong to, and the values we uphold. What one society views as a natural, biological response to external pressures, another might perceive as a sign of personal failure or weakness. Across different cultures, the understanding of stress and overwhelm often varies in ways that reflect deeply embedded historical, social, and philosophical frameworks. Particularly in the West, stress is frequently perceived as a weakness, a sign that an individual is not strong or capable enough to manage the relentless demands of modern life. In such environments, stress is often linked to personal failure. In corporate and competitive spaces, employees are often expected to juggle multiple tasks at once, optimize every moment, and be ever present, whether physically in the office or digitally through constant notifications and emails. The individual who cannot maintain this pace is often seen as lacking resilience or mental fortitude. The iconic hustle culture is an example of how stress is not only normalized but glorified in many high-performance societies. Here, overwork is often equated with success, and burnout is an expected byproduct of dedication and commitment. The idea of pushing one's cognitive and emotional limits is almost valorized. Those who succeed are often those who show no visible signs of stress. For instance, in Silicon Valley, the work hard, play hard mentality prevails, where tech leaders and entrepreneurs boast about working 70 to 80 hours a week, and stress is often seen as an inevitable yet necessary part of achieving greatness. This worldview reinforces the idea that the capacity to handle stress is a marker of personal worth and potential. In stark contrast, other cultures may view stress as a natural part of the human experience, a biological response to overwhelming stimuli that should be acknowledged rather than repressed or ignored. For instance, Japanese culture has long embraced the concept of karoshi, which literally translates to death from overwork. This term emerged in the 1970s when several high-profile cases of death due to heart attacks, strokes, and suicides, attributed to long working hours and chronic stress, began to surface. Although this is a tragic phenomenon, it's important to understand that Japan has a deep cultural reverence for hard work and dedication. However, in recent years, there has been growing recognition of the need to balance work and personal life to avoid these extreme consequences. In Japan, mental health has traditionally been a taboo subject, but this attitude is changing as more attention is paid to the detrimental effects of unmitigated stress. Similarly, in Nordic cultures, particularly in countries like Sweden and Denmark, the approach to work and stress is notably different. These countries emphasize work-life balance, and stress is seen as a signal that something needs to change. Workers in these countries typically enjoy a significant amount of vacation time, shorter work hours, and societal systems designed to reduce pressure. In these societies, stress is not perceived as a sign of personal failure, but rather as an indicator that the systems surrounding an individual, be it work, family, or society at large, need to be adjusted to alleviate the burden. But there is still a tension here. While some cultures have increasingly come to acknowledge the negative consequences of stress and cognitive overload, others continue to celebrate the idea of resilience through endurance, and in doing so, glorify the very mechanisms that push individuals to their breaking points. This duality, stress as a weakness in some cultures and as a badge of honor in others, reflects a complex global dilemma about the way we understand the human capacity for emotional and cognitive endurance. In modern society, technological advances have added a new layer to our understanding of stress and overwhelm. With the advent of smartphones, social media, and 24/7 connectivity, our brains are now subjected to an unprecedented level of constant stimulation. The constant bombardment of notifications, emails, texts, and updates keeps us in a state of alertness, making it nearly impossible to disengage or take a mental break. This technological overload has become a central component of modern stress, and its implications are profound. The average person today processes more information in a single day than their ancestors would have encountered in an entire lifetime. Our brains are bombarded by a deluge of data, news, advertisements, social media updates, emails, and countless other forms of information, all vying for our attention. This constant influx not only increases cognitive load but also contributes to decision fatigue, a phenomenon where the sheer number of decisions we are required to make each day leads to exhaustion, impaired judgment, and ultimately, mental shutdown. In a study conducted by the University of California, San Diego, researchers found that the average person now checks their phone once every 12 minutes, leading to an astounding 80 times a day. The frequent switching between tasks, reading an email, checking social media, responding to a message, disrupts the brain's ability to focus deeply and consistently on a single task. This phenomenon is known as task switching, and it has been shown to lead to diminished cognitive performance, as the brain is forced to constantly shift focus, using more energy and attention with each switch. The problem is compounded by the fact that many modern jobs require individuals to be constantly available, whether for meetings, emails, or other communications. multitasking has become a requirement in many workplaces, even though research has shown that the human brain is not designed for it. The reality of modern work is that people are not just responsible for their own tasks, but they are also required to manage multiple streams of communication simultaneously, making cognitive overload inevitable. The result is often a feedback loop where stress builds up because of the constant mental workload, leading to a shutdown of cognitive functions and eventually burnout. Among modern scientists, there is a growing divide over how to address the rising levels of cognitive overload and stress. On one hand, there are those who advocate for increased brain training, and resilience building techniques as the solution to modern life's demands. Researchers like Dr. Andrew Huberman, a professor of neuroscience at Stanford University, suggests that training the brain through exercises like meditation, mindfulness, and cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT) can help individuals build the mental resilience needed to withstand the pressures of modern life. Huberman's research on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself in response to learning and experience, has opened up new possibilities for understanding how we can train our brains to handle stress more effectively. From this perspective, stress is not inherently harmful, it's how we respond to it that matters. According to Huberman and others in this camp, it's possible to rewire our brains to handle cognitive overload more effectively. For example, mindfulness practices can help individuals develop greater awareness of their emotional responses, allowing them to respond to stress in more adaptive ways. This approach focuses on the brain's capacity for growth and adaptation, even in the face of overwhelming demands. Resilience, in this context, becomes a skill that can be learned and developed, and stress becomes something to manage rather than avoid. However, there are those who argue that the very conditions we are subject to in modern society may be beyond what the brain was designed to handle. Experts like Dr. Johann Hari, author of Lost Connections, argued that the incessant demands of modern life, constant digital stimulation, the pressure to perform at ever-increasing levels, and the breakdown of community are putting an enormous strain on our neurological well-being. For Hari and others, the solution is not simply to build more resilience, but to rethink the systems that are causing these stressors in the first place. Hari's perspective emphasizes that stress is not merely a personal issue to be dealt with on an individual level. It's a societal issue. The stress caused by technological distractions, long work hours, and social isolation is a byproduct of larger cultural and economic forces. In his view, pushing people to toughen up or build resilience without addressing the root causes of their stress risks exacerbating mental health issues and perpetuating a cycle of burnout. According to Hari, the rise in conditions like depression, anxiety, and burnout is not just an individual failure but a systemic one. He calls for a shift in the way we view success, productivity, and well-being, one that prioritizes connection, community, and mental health over the relentless drive for individual achievement. The tension between resilience and vulnerability in the face of cognitive and emotional overload is not a modern phenomenon. Throughout history, different cultures and individuals have faced similar struggles, with varying levels of success in navigating stress and cognitive overload. One striking historical example is the life of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher who faced immense pressures during his reign, including wars, political instability, and personal tragedies. Despite these challenges, he is often held up as a model of resilience, writing extensively about the importance of maintaining inner peace and mental fortitude in the face of extremes. Recent studies have provided compelling evidence that controlled, brief moments of overwhelm can actually trigger positive changes in brain structure and function. One such study, conducted by neuroscientist Dr. Emily Whitaker, investigated how short bursts of stress, when properly managed, could enhance brain plasticity. The research team exposed participants to a series of mentally demanding tasks designed to push them to their limits, but not to the point of complete mental shutdown. These tasks were brief and intense, lasting only a few minutes, with intervals of rest between sessions. The results were surprising. After undergoing these brief bursts of cognitive overload, the participants' brains showed increased activity in regions associated with learning, problem solving, and emotional regulation. Whitaker, single quotes, S team, also found that these controlled stressors led to an increase in the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor BDNF a protein that plays a pivotal role in the growth of new neurons and the strengthening of synaptic connections. Essentially, the brain responded to stress by becoming more adaptable, more capable of coping with future challenges. This phenomenon mirrors what athletes often experience during training. Their muscles become stronger after being subjected to brief, intense periods of exertion, followed by recovery. Similarly, the brain becomes more resilient after it is temporarily stressed by mental challenges, enabling us to learn and grow. This concept of productive stress is the foundation of cognitive training programs, mindfulness practices, and even certain therapeutic techniques designed to help people become more resilient in the face of adversity. For example, brief, controlled exposure to cognitive dissonance, a state of mental discomfort arising from conflicting beliefs or experiences, can lead to deeper understanding and cognitive flexibility. Similarly, emotional exposure therapy gradually exposes individuals to stressors in a controlled manner, helping them build emotional resilience over time. The key to these practices is that they create moments of overwhelm that are short-lived, allowing the brain to respond by adapting rather than shutting down. In this context, stress becomes an engine for neural growth rather than a barrier to cognitive performance. The brain is being challenged to adapt, to find new ways of thinking, and to reorganize its networks to become more efficient. The resulting neuroplastic changes allow for improved emotional regulation, enhanced problem abilities, and a greater capacity for creativity. Just like physical exercise causes the body to grow stronger through brief and intense strain, so too does mental exertion cause the brain to work out and develop greater resilience and capacity. However, as with any system, there's a dark side to this mechanism. If we push the brain too hard, for too long, or too frequently, the adaptive response begins to backfire. In these cases, the brain's protective mechanisms, which were designed to preserve cognitive and emotional functioning, become overwhelmed themselves. Instead of sparking growth, chronic stress triggers a downward spiral that can lead to mental health disorders like anxiety, depression, and burnout. Chronic stress, when the brain is repeatedly exposed to high levels of cognitive and emotional overload without adequate recovery, interferes with the brain's ability to form new neural connections. The stress response becomes prolonged, rather than brief, and the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for high functions like decision-making, planning, and impulse control, begins to deteriorate. Simultaneously, the hippocampus, the region of the brain associated with memory and emotional regulation, can shrink under prolonged stress, impairing cognitive function and emotional stability. Dr. Livia Ferraro, a leading neuroscientist, has studied the effects of chronic stress on brain plasticity, finding that prolonged exposure to stress hormones like cortisol can have a devastating impact on the brain's ability to recover from trauma and mental strain. In her research, Ferraro showed that after long-term stress exposure, the brain's neuroplastic response can become imbalanced, leading to negative outcomes like cognitive fatigue, memory problems, and emotional dysregulation. This is why individuals who experience ongoing stress, whether from work, family issues, or societal pressures, are at a higher risk for mental health disorders. The key difference between productive stress and destructive overload lies in the brain's recovery time. In a healthy system, after a brief period of overwhelm, the brain has the opportunity to rest, repair, and reorganize itself. This recovery phase is crucial for allowing the positive effects of stress to take root. But when stress becomes chronic, the recovery phase is compromised. Instead of promoting growth, the brain becomes stuck in a perpetual cycle of overload, and the protective mechanisms designed to help us survive in short bursts become detrimental. In the long run, the realization of this paradox, that the brain's ability to shut down in response to overwhelm is both a protective mechanism and a catalyst for growth, forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about stress. While stress has long been vilified for its role in causing burnout, fatigue, and anxiety, it's now clear that stress, in the right amounts, is a necessary fuel for brain development. Overwhelm, when managed correctly, can be a powerful tool for fostering resilience, creativity, and emotional regulation. However, The fine line between beneficial and destructive stress is critical. It is not the presence of stress that determines its effect on the brain, but its frequency, duration, and intensity. Short bursts of overwhelm are productive, helping the brain adapt and grow. Prolonged, uncontrolled stress is toxic, leading to burnout and mental health disorders. This understanding of stress as a double-edged sword changes the way we approach mental health and cognitive performance. It challenges us to rethink how we organize our lives, how we work, and how we manage stress. Rather than seeking to eliminate stress entirely or to simply push through it, we must learn how to harness it briefly, intermittently, and with proper recovery. In doing so, we allow the brain to thrive, not by avoiding overwhelm, but by strategically embracing it, knowing when to challenge ourselves and when to rest and recover. The key, then, is not to remove stress from our lives, but to manage it too. Understand the delicate balance between pushing our limits and giving our brains the recovery they need to flourish. Only then can we truly harness the power of stress as a tool for cognitive and emotional growth, rather than letting it become the force that undermines our mental well-being. As we step back to reconsider our understanding of the brain, the nuances of its response to stress and overwhelm become increasingly clear. Our brains are not simply organs of relentless problem-solving or emotional resilience. They are also delicate systems that balance both protection and growth in the face of adversity. Understanding this duality is key to optimizing how we navigate the challenges of modern life. At its core, the brain's reaction to stress is adaptive. When faced with overwhelming stimuli, whether cognitive or emotional, the brain engages a protective response. This is an evolutionary mechanism that helped our ancestors survive extreme circumstances. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher-order functions like critical thinking and problem-solving, temporarily shuts down to conserve energy, redirecting resources to more immediate survival functions. In this sense, stress is a defensive way to shield us from the cognitive and emotional demands that would otherwise be overwhelming. But this protective mechanism isn't just about shutting down. It's about shaping us. It gives the brain space to recover, reorganize, and grow. What we often overlook, however, is that stress, particularly in brief bursts, is not only protective but transformative. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt to challenges and strengthen its neural connections, relies on moments of overwhelm. These instances of cognitive strain, when managed properly, lead to positive brain changes, enhanced learning capacity, emotional resilience, and even greater creativity. So, while the brain's defensive response is necessary for survival in high-stress environments, it's also a mechanism that allows us to grow, learn, and evolve as individuals. The key lies in balance. Too much stress, especially over prolonged periods, leads to burnout and cognitive collapse. But when stress is well regulated, it triggers neuroplastic changes that promote mental health and cognitive function. This understanding has profound implications for how we approach stress in our own lives. Rather than viewing stress solely as a threat, we can begin to see it as a natural, and even essential, ingredient for growth. But how can we optimize this natural defense without triggering the negative consequences of chronic overwhelm? Recent breakthroughs in neuroscience have shed light on how we can harness the brain's natural defenses to optimize stress and prevent the long-term consequences of overload. The key is understanding the principles of **C. Uncontrolled stress and recovery ensuring that our brains are occasionally challenged, but also given ample time to reset and recalibrate. One area of particular interest is mindfulness practice, which has been shown to provide significant benefits for managing stress and improving cognitive function. Mindfulness exercises, such as focused breathing, meditation, or body scanning, help individuals develop greater awareness of their emotional and cognitive responses. This increased awareness allows the brain to identify when stress is becoming overwhelming and to regulate its response more effectively. Over time, mindfulness training can lead to structural changes in the brain, particularly in the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, the brain regions associated with decision-making and emotional regulation. A study published in Psychiatry Research Neuroimaging by Dr. Sarah Lazar, a Harvard neuroscientist, found that participants who underwent mindfulness-based stress reduction (MBS) experienced an increase in gray matter density in areas of the brain associated with learning, memory, and emotional regulation. Additionally, the study showed that these individuals had decreased activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, suggesting that mindfulness training helps modulate the stress response and reduces the negative impact of stress on the brain. This evidence supports the idea that mindfulness, by helping individuals manage their stress responses, can make the brain more resilient to both cognitive and emotional overwhelm. Lifestyle adjustments also play a critical role in optimizing the brain's response to stress. Physical exercise, for example, has long been known to improve cognitive function and mental health. Studies have demonstrated that aerobic exercise, in particular, leads to the release of neurotrophins, proteins that support the growth of new neurons and the formation of new synaptic connections. Exercise has a dual benefit. It helps reduce the harmful effects of chronic stress by lowering cortisol levels, and it provides a form of controlled physical overload that can stimulate neuroplasticity and brain growth. Another lifestyle factor that influences the brain's stress response is sleep. Quality sleep is essential for the brain to process, recover, and reset after stressful experiences. During deep sleep, the brain consolidates memories, regulates emotions, and clears out the toxic byproducts of stress. Sleep deprivation, on the other hand, exacerbates the effects of stress, impairing cognitive function and emotional regulation. A study by Dr. Matthew Walker, a sleep scientist at the University of California, Berkeley, found that sleep deprivation not only reduces cognitive performance but also increases emotional reactivity, making individuals more vulnerable to stress. By prioritizing sleep and adopting healthy sleep habits, individuals can optimize their brain's ability to recover from stress, ensuring that it remains adaptable and resilient in the face of future challenges. Beyond mindfulness and lifestyle changes, specific cognitive exercises can help train the brain to manage overwhelm more effectively. One such exercise is cognitive reappraisal, a technique used in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to help individuals reframe negative thoughts and emotions. By consciously changing the way we interpret stressful events, we can reduce their emotional impact and prevent them from overwhelming our cognitive systems. For example, instead of viewing a challenging work deadline as an insurmountable obstacle, cognitive reappraisal encourages individuals to see it as an opportunity to focus, improve time management, and demonstrate resilience. This shift in perspective not only reduces the immediate emotional stress but also engages the brain's prefrontal cortex, allowing for better decision-making and emotional regulation. Repeated practice of cognitive reappraisal can lead to structural changes in the brain, strengthening the circuits involved in emotion regulation and enhancing the brain's ability to cope with future stressors. Another cognitive exercise that can enhance resilience to stress is working memory training. Working memory, the brain's ability to hold and manipulate information temporarily, plays a central role in cognitive control and emotional regulation. Research has shown that training working memory can improve both cognitive performance and emotional resilience. By strengthening the connections between the prefrontal cortex and other brain regions involved in stress regulation, techniques such as memory games, puzzles, and attention training exercises can improve the brain's capacity to juggle multiple tasks without becoming overwhelmed. Together, mindfulness, physical exercise, sleep, and cognitive exercises represent a holistic approach to managing stress and optimizing the brain's natural defenses. These strategies not only help us better cope with the demands of modern life, but they also promote long-term brain health and resilience. By practicing these techniques, we can train the brain to respond to stress in ways that enhance our cognitive abilities and emotional well-being without triggering the harmful effects of chronic overload. BC is, for instance, allow for direct communication between the brain and external devices, opening up the possibility of real-time monitoring and regulation of brain activity. In the context of stress, BC could potentially be used to identify when the brain is entering a state of overwhelm and provide real-time feedback or stimulation to help regulate brain activity and prevent cognitive shutdown. Similarly, neurofeedback uses real-time brainwave data to train individuals to regulate their brain activity consciously. This approach has shown promise in treating conditions like anxiety and ADHD, and could potentially be used to help individuals manage stress more effectively. transcranial direct current stimulation (TDCS). Is another emerging technology that involves applying a low electrical current to specific areas of the brain. This non-invasive technique has been shown to enhance cognitive function, improve mood, and even reduce stress by stimulating regions of the brain involved in emotional regulation while still in its early stages. TDCS holds great potential for refining how we cope with stress and emotional overload, offering a targeted approach to optimizing brain health. In addition to neurotechnology, new developments in mental health therapies are beginning to emphasize neuroscientific insights into stress and resilience. Therapies that combine biological, psychological, and social approaches to mental health, known as biopsychosocial therapies, are gaining traction. These therapies aim to address the complex, interconnected factors that contribute to stress and mental health issues, integrating mindfulness, cognitive exercises, physical health strategies, and social support into a unified treatment approach. By combining the best of neuroscience with therapeutic interventions, biopsychosocial therapies have the potential to provide as we move forward. Breakthroughs in both neurotechnology and mental health treatments will provide new opportunities to optimize how we manage stress, refine the brain's natural defenses, and ultimately improve our cognitive resilience and emotional health. The future holds great promise for creating a world where stress is no longer a debilitating force but a tool that can be harnessed for growth and well-being. As we arrive at the final moments of our exploration into the brain's response to overwhelm, we find ourselves confronted with a profound realization. The nature of the brain's protective mechanisms is far more intricate, far more nuanced than we could have imagined. It is not a mere shield from harm, but a delicate dance between survival, growth, and adaptation. At first glance, the brain's tendency to shut down in the face of overwhelming stress appears to be a flaw in the system, a defensive reflex that cuts us off from the world at the very moment when we most need to engage with it. Yet, this shutdown mechanism is, in fact, a shield and a springboard. It protects us in the moment of crisis, but it also paves the way for future resilience and transformation. This duality, the brain's ability to both protect and propel us forward, is perhaps the most profound lesson we can glean from our study of overwhelm. It suggests that we cannot simply run from stress, nor can we expect to permanently shield ourselves from the pressures of modern life. The brain's protective mechanisms were never designed to create a life free from difficulty, but to enable us to endure, adapt, and emerge stronger in the face of those difficulties. This leaves us with a question that asks us not just about how we manage stress, but about how we learn to live with it. If the brain can shield us from too much, can we learn to trust it? Can we allow ourselves to believe that, just as it reacts in moments of overwhelm, it can also guide us toward balance in an age that constantly demands more? The paradox remains: is it enough to simply trust the brain's mechanisms, or do we need to actively harness them to find the fine line between embracing challenge and avoiding collapse? There is an old adage that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. In the context of the brain's adaptive responses, this saying rings truer than we might think. But in our modern world, we face an unprecedented flood of expectations, tasks, and responsibilities. Unlike the challenges faced by our ancestors, these stresses are not of limited duration. They are constant, relentless, and often inescapable. The key, then, is not to see stress as a force to be eradicated or conquered, but as a companion to be understood, navigated, and even befriended. We are not seeking to avoid overwhelm, but rather to learn how to manage it with resilience, flexibility, and awareness. When we consider this, we must ask ourselves, can we evolve in how we handle stress? Just as the brain is continuously evolving in response to new experiences, so too can we. Our journey forward may not be about eliminating stress or escaping from overwhelm, but rather about finding a way to navigate it with grace. In this new paradigm, stress becomes a tool, not for breaking us down, but for building us up. It is through the art of navigating stress, in the right measure and with proper recovery, that we evolve into stronger, more adaptive versions of ourselves. However, in this age of constant input and external pressure, how do we cultivate this resilience without succumbing to the very forces that cause overwhelm? How do we train ourselves to manage stress rather than to be consumed by it? The answer may lie in a subtle yet powerful shift in perspective. It is not enough to simply react to stress as we always have. We must learn to anticipate, acknowledge, and embrace it as a part of our human experience. This may involve shifting away from the notion that life should be lived in a state of perpetual productivity, always striving, always performing, always doing, toward a deeper acceptance of balance. Perhaps true mental strength does not lie in *** pushing past our limits, but in knowing when to let go ***. To trust the brain's protective mechanisms is not just to understand them intellectually, but to intuitively recognize when the brain needs rest, when it needs to disengage, and when it needs time to recharge. The key, it seems, is not to be caught in an endless loop of self-exertion, but to allow space for recovery and reflection. When we listen to the brain, we begin to understand that moments of overwhelm do not have to signal weakness. They signal a call to pause, to reset, and to let the brain rewire itself. Only by letting go can we find the *** mental clarity and emotional strength *** to move forward. This reflection takes us into deeper philosophical territory, where we realize that the brain's protective mechanisms mirror something larger about the human condition. The need for balance in all things. Life's challenges are inevitable. Stress and overwhelm are unavoidable parts of the human experience. But perhaps the true challenge is not how to avoid these forces, but how to live with them in harmony. It is through balance that we learn to integrate stress into our lives in a way that promotes growth without risking burnout. Our ancestors learned to adapt to the unpredictable forces of nature, to rise above the challenges they faced, and to navigate the tumultuous tides of existence. And in some sense, we are asked to do the same today, not with the constant struggle for survival, but with the ongoing battle for mental and emotional equilibrium. This equilibrium, as it turns out, is not found in pushing ourselves to extremes or avoiding discomfort. It is found in understanding that overwhelm is a natural part of our lives, and that our response to it is what ultimately shapes our experience. In this pursuit, we must embrace the limits of our capacity, not as failures but as guides, as subtle signals that the brain is asking for a break, a moment of peace, a chance to reset. It is through self-compassion, a gentle awareness of when to push forward and when to surrender, that we can foster true resilience, the ability to let go, to trust the brain's protective mechanisms, to step back and allow for rest, becomes not a sign of weakness, but a mark of true strength. For it is in this letting go that we unlock our capacity for growth, for renewal, and for thriving in the face of modern life's ceaseless demands. As we look toward the future, we find ourselves not asking how we can avoid stress or shield ourselves from the overwhelming complexities of the world, but instead asking how we can use stress as a tool, how we can find that delicate balance between challenge and recovery, between engagement and rest, between pushing forward and stepping back. This balance is where resilience is born, and it is in this space of equilibrium that we learn to navigate stress with strength, grace, and wisdom. Perhaps, in the end, it's not about conquering stress or overcoming overwhelm in a battle of willpower. Perhaps the true nature of mental strength lies in knowing when to let go, in trusting the brain's protective mechanisms, in acknowledging our limitations, and in allowing ourselves the time and space we need to recover. It is in this space of surrender that we find the courage to move forward, the wisdom to know when to engage and when to retreat, and the strength to thrive in a world that will always ask more of us. In the quiet moments of letting go, we discovered that the brain's defense systems were never meant to break us. They were meant to help us evolve, to help us grow, and to help us find our way through the overwhelming tides of life with a sense of resilience and inner peace. Is in this understanding, this acceptance, that we will find not just the strength to survive, but the ability to flourish,